To my clock, it is exactly 9 o'clock. Very warm welcome to this Parliamentary Oversight Committee. It is Friday, the 4th of September. I'd like to welcome all the members, the Speaker and Deputy Speaker, the Secretary and the parliamentary officials in attendance. I'd like to start by asking the members to introduce themselves. My name is Mireille Wengen. I'm the chair of this standing committee.
Good morning. My name is Ricardo Mackenzie. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Goeiemôre voorsitter, Dylan Mitchell.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Regan Allen.
Good morning. I don't see any other members on the line. I will then hand over to the speaker. Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson, and good morning to the members of the committee. Chairperson, I think the quarterly report that we'll be presenting for the first quarter of 2020, one of the things that it will signify, as you'll see, is that it will give us an opportunity to reflect on the ability of this parliament to perform under extremely difficult circumstances of the world pandemic. But I think at this stage, I just want to welcome the team and say that we're here to present the first quarterly report for the first quarter of 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to you as well, Madam Deputy Speaker. And then, Mr. Secretary, good morning. And if you'd like to introduce your team, please.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Speaker. Good morning, Deputy Speaker, honourable members and colleagues. Maybe just to introduce the team. Mr. Hindley, the Deputy Secretary, is experiencing load shedding. So he had made arrangements that Ms. Irma will do the presentation. Mr. Hindley will join us as the load shedding is attended to. The Chief Financial Officer, Chairperson, is also on leave for this week, leave that had been approved and commitments that would have been made. But Mr. Jawuddin will be doing the presentation on the financial statements. We then have Mr. Titus, the Director Institutional Enablement. With Mr. Titus, I see we have Mr. Skriker, the Manager for ICT, also with us, Chairperson. We also have Mr. Mario Sassman, the Manager responsible for committees, Ms. Sunel Fouchier, the Director responsible for public engagement. We also then have the IT support in attendance, the colleagues from ICT, and then Chairperson, I think and Ms. Ackham, the Office of the Secretary is also in attendance, Chairperson. That would be, and then the team from the Speaker's office will probably introduce themselves then, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Good morning and welcome to you all. Would the Speaker's office like to introduce themselves?
Morning, Speaker, morning, Chairperson, morning, colleagues, morning, members. I'm Yanni Ace and I'm an advisor in the Speaker's office.
Morning.
Good morning, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Chairperson of the committee. I'm Madoda Matuchana, Manager in the Speaker's office. Good morning.
Morning. Good morning. Right. With that round of introductions done, then I'm going to move over to apologies. We have noted Mr. Hindley's difficulties in connecting. I have received no further apologies. Are there any other apologies to be tabled at this stage? None? Just for me to go through the usual rules of engagement for virtual meetings. Members and participants are muted at the beginning of the meeting to avoid background noises. If members would like to flag a point of order, if they would please do so using the chat function or by raising their virtual hands. We ask that video and audio be switched off to improve the quality of the connection, especially during load shedding. However, if a person is speaking or presenting, we ask that they please do use their video and microphone. If there are any presentations being shared, we ask that once the presentation is over, if the responsible person would unshare the video. Today we are dealing with, as the Speaker had mentioned, the first quarterly report for the 2020-2021 financial year and the first quarterly financial statement for the same period. And then we have also asked in terms of FAMPLA for feedback on any instructions issued in terms of Section 37.6 and Section 66.2 of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act. So on that note, I believe the Speaker and the Secretary will brief the committee on those matters at hand. I know, Mr. Speaker, you have made some introductory remarks, but if you'd like to make some further remarks before we move into the presentation, we would welcome them now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope I'm not going to be penalized for the video. Just want to be able to look at you, and then you can look at me as I speak. Chairperson, I think there are two things. One is that we've been able to function optimally as this institution. When lockdown was introduced on the 26th of March, we being the first day for lockdown, we did not go on lockdown. We did not shut down this parliament. We continued and we instead created innovative measures, one of which is the virtual committee that you chair, which has been doing amazing work as an ad hoc committee. But also other committees have been able to work virtually, and we've been able to see creativity from our IT team, the great IT team that we have in this country. And I think we need to give them a round of applause for the work that they've been able to do. And of course, the entire team led by the Secretary. But I think, Chair, we had a number of programs planned in terms of traveling in our international relations space. And of course, we had commitments. As you know, we are signatory to, we are affiliating to a number of bodies, the NCSL, the CPA. So the conferences and any other meetings that were scheduled in that space had to be postponed because of the international lockdown based on the pandemic that we are all confronted with. But what we've also did was to try and curtail the training programs and any other unnecessary traveling, which as a result of lockdown could not be accommodated. So all the training programs that were planned, you will notice that some of those expenditures could not be met because we had to reschedule them, and some of them are coming up now. We're going to use some of the virtual platforms. And of course, we'll see where it's possible to have physical contact. As you know, the economy is opening up. So we've got a parliament that had to find creative ways, Chairperson and members of the committee, to continue its work so that we're able to serve the people of this province and hold the executive to account through our committees. So that is what we've been able to achieve. But also the fact that the Speaker and this Parliament had to put measures in place to accommodate members over and above the limitations by ensuring that we bring the committees virtually, and the training of staff members on the new systems of doing things, even though they were working from home and some were in the building, and we're able to ensure that we continue to serve your interest as members, as we have to do, and ensure that continuously we also able to protect the members and spend monies on PPE. And we have done so because we needed to ensure that this building is safe and ensure that the staff members are safe, and that we continue to do our job as elected representatives. So that is where I will stop, Chair. The detail will be given by the Secretary and of course the rest of the team. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for those introductory remarks. We are certainly in unusual times, yes, quite a lot of changes have happened. So I don't suspect that these reports will be anything like the previous ones. Mr. Secretary, may I then hand over to you to, if you'd like to make some introductory remarks as well, and then move straight into the presentation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and honourable members. Good morning again. Maybe just a brief introduction. Chairperson and honourable members, if at the end of the year, beginning of 2021, there will be a survey on what were the most common words used during 2020, it would probably be, firstly, your mic is on mute. And secondly, pivot. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament Administration has been able to enable the organization to just do one of those things, pivot, during the lockdown period in the following manner. We had started off with a hard lockdown, and during the hard lockdown period, only essential services were possible. When the lockdown alert levels had then been lowered, we were able to put the following measures in place. The work of committees and the work of the House itself, the plenary sessions were initially done via virtual means only. We had then graduated to a hybrid session, and yesterday, for the members who would have experienced it, I am pleased to announce we were even able to add language translation services to the plenary sessions. From my experience from yesterday, the technical issues were not problematic and members were able to listen to the translation services. In hopping between the translation channels, I had picked up that there were few members in each of those channels that were using the service. With regards to staffing matters, we were then also, when the lockdown levels had lowered, the administration through the senior management team was able to put staffing plans in place. We started with just under 20%. We had then moved to 36% of the staff, and we are currently at just over 41% of the staff, where staff are then allowed to also, if I can use the term, the hybrid methodology, where most of the time they would probably be working from home, but there are core staff up to a maximum of 41% on any given day that could then also be performing their work in the offices, and that is dependent on the needs of the organization in terms of plenary sessions and or committee sessions. There's been a request that maybe we also look at how we could equip the committee rooms for committees to also participate in hybrid sessions. I'm pleased to report that at least one of the rooms, the committee rooms on the 4th floor, have now been equipped for the hybrid sessions. Our IT team needs to procure 1 or 2 sets of equipment so that the second committee room can also be equipped for hybrid committee meetings. So, Chairperson, operationally, we've put measures in place. We're always looking at how we can improve on those measures and add more measures so that we remain the leading provincial legislature within the country with regards to continuing with the work in these difficult times. Chairperson, without any further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Ms. Irma to do the presentation. Any questions on the first quarter performance report will be responded to by the relevant directors and the managers within those areas. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Chairperson, members and colleagues. I'm just going to share the presentation. Please just give me an indication when you can see it on your screens.
We can see it, thank you.
All right, so as the Secretary already indicated, Mr. Hindley has experienced some difficulties with load shedding and he will join the meeting once he has a better connection. But he then asked me to just go through the first quarter performance information presentation that we have here. And as an introduction to the Q1 performance information and the presentation, I just need to mention upfront, Chairperson, that we did not achieve too many of our targets in the first quarter. In fact, we only achieved 46% of our targets. Now, this is mainly due to COVID-19 and the national lockdown, and of course, us as an institution trying to adapt to the new normal, as it's so often referred to. And we are in the process of reviewing our APP for 2020-21. COVID-19, of course, had a major impact on the operational environment of the WCPP, and we need to take that into account in our annual performance plan and planning for the year ahead. This review will be done in line with other departments, and it will, of course, be sent to the POC in due course. As for Q1, we decided to do the presentation a bit differently this quarter. Normally, we would only have highlights on this slide, but we decided to add our challenges as well. And I can say that a lot of them started off as challenges, but they turned around and now became our highlights for the quarter. So, of course, it was difficult to adapt to the new normal, working from home, virtual meetings. We went through an audit process, and for the first time, we actually had to engage with the Auditor General virtually and through email communications where normally we would have face-to-face meetings with them. We had to procure the PPE and ensure overall compliance with COVID-19 regulations. But of course, like the Secretary said, we now have certain staff members that on a specific schedule actually returned to work. So that became a highlight for us then. And then during Q1, we also successfully implemented 44 virtual committee meetings, 7 virtual house sittings, and 1 oversight visit during lockdown. Just an overview of the Q1 performance information. We currently have 38 performance indicators for this financial year. And for Q1, we had to report on 13. So of the 13, 6 were achieved, 1 partially achieved, and then 6 not achieved. So the presentation will focus mainly on the deviations for those targets that were either partially achieved or not achieved. So within Program 1, Governance, Leadership and Administration, we had no planned targets for the Office of the Speaker, Office of the Secretary and Institutional Enablement. There was only 1 plan output, and that was for financial management within the Financial Compliance and Internal Control Unit, and that target was not achieved. The plan output was 1 inspection report issued identifying control gaps in processes, and the reason for that being recorded as not achieved is that the inspection report was issued on the 30th of June, but only finalized on the 6th of July, which falls within the second quarter and will therefore only be reported on in the second quarter. Program 2, Parliamentary Support Services. Within plenary support, we had 2 planned targets, 1 achieved, 1 not achieved. Committee Administration 2, both achieved. Hansard Services 1, which was not achieved. Sergeant at Arms 2, 1 achieved, 1 not achieved. In terms of the deviations for plenary support, it was 1 procedural related capacity building session with members and or staff. And due to the lockdown and us adapting to the new way of conducting our work, that capacity building that was planned could not be implemented. With Hansard Services, 3 contact meetings should have been held with the service provider. It was not achieved. There were no on-site meetings during lockdown. And then 1 virtual meeting was established in June and conducted on the 26th of June. For both of these targets, I just want to mention that we have, since we reported on the first quarter, had discussions about how we can do things differently going forward and maybe look at capacity building sessions in a virtual environment to ensure that we do achieve these targets going forward. The last one within Program 2 is Sergeant at Arms, and the planned output was 100% verification and processing of visitors on the VMS system. The reason why this was not achieved, the reception area was closed for the entire first quarter due to lockdown. The VMS system was not working, couldn't record any of the transactions, but I do need to mention here that we do still record through an attendance register our staff members that enter the building, and that is in compliance with the COVID-19 regulations, but the VMS system is not recording any transactions and therefore not achieved. In Program 3, Public Engagement, we have Stakeholder Management and Communication Services. They had 2 planned outputs and both were not achieved. Public Education and Outreach, 1, and that one was partially achieved. So in Stakeholder Management and Communication Services, it was 1 international relations or protocol training or briefing session held with members or staff. DIRCO initially indicated that they will be holding virtual training sessions, but then later on indicated that it will only be finalized towards the end of the year. Stakeholder management then made some investigations to a private service provider, but the costs were just prohibitive. Second one there was the approved framework and quarterly implementation report. So for Q1, it was the approval of the framework. It was not achieved. Like the speaker already said, international travel and engagements, of course, under lockdown is banned. And so it was decided that other critical areas will be given priority here and that the approved framework will be reprioritized to the second quarter. Public education and outreach. The planned output there was an approved constituency program. It was partially achieved, and the reason for that is a proposal for members' constituency program was drafted by Public Education and Outreach. It was approved by the Director Public Engagement and was routed to the Speaker's Office for approval, but it has not been approved yet. As the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker, they are still engaging on discussions on the program, and for that reason, it was only partially achieved. And then the last program here is program 4, which is member support. Under members administration enabling allowances, we had no planned targets for quarter 1, but for political party support, that is the secretarial allowances and constituency allowances, both of those targets were achieved in terms of payments being processed. And that is just an overview of the first quarter program performance information. Like the Secretary said, if there's any specific questions about deviations, then the directors will respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Would you like to add?
Chairperson, thank you. Chairperson, if you would just allow me to make concluding remarks, Chairperson, on this specific presentation. Members must just remember, and Chairperson, that this report is as at the 30th of June 2020. Between the 1st of July 2020 and to date, there's been quite a bit of work on the targets that we could still play catch up with that had not been achieved in the first quarter. One of those areas relates to the constituency program. There has been an engagement between the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker and the Secretary, and also the Director Public Engagement regarding the concept itself of the constituency program. We had received valuable guidance and direction from the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker, and the relevant directorate is working to implement that specific guidance. With regards to the audit for the 2019-2020 financial year, that had gone off as planned in terms of the timelines. We are one of the only legislatures in the country that had stuck to our initial timelines even during COVID-19. The documents, for example, the financial statements and the performance information were supposed to be submitted to the Auditor General on the 31st of May 2020, and that would have been the normal timeline. We had submitted it by the 30th of May, where other legislatures had asked for extensions and postponements and had not submitted on that date. We had managed to finalize the audit by the 31st of July, which is in the second quarter, again, where other legislatures and parliaments, their audit was finalized later. There was a report from the Auditor General that was ATC'd and was submitted to the Speaker as the executive authority, where the Auditor General had then indicated why they could not have submitted their signed off reports by the due date. But it was not because of the administration not being able to play their part. With regards to a further invention that the administration had managed to put in place was the oversight visits, Chairperson and members. During the lowering of the lockdown levels, we had put health and safety control measures in place, where the first one was the appointment of a compliance officer in the person of Mr. Naidu, and we had then also developed a checklist for oversight visits also to then start and to be continued. And in the second quarter, there's been quite a few oversight visits that members and committees have embarked on. My last point is our review of the WCPP strategy and APP. With the advent of COVID-19 and the lockdown, the administration, the SMT had felt it necessary to then just review our strat plan and our APP to see whether it would still be relevant in the new normal. And there are a few proposals that we'll first present to the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker in an EXCO meeting before we follow the other processes in terms of those areas. Thank you very much, Chairperson, for allowing me to give that conclusion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and thank you very much to you for the presentation. I'm going to take a round of questions on that quarterly performance report. You had actually answered one of my questions, which was, given that we're in unprecedented times, the APPs that were established previously could not have contemplated the kind of world we would be living in this year. I just wanted to then understand, what is the process for amending APPs if necessary? I'm sure that it must be quite tricky to do. I'd like to just understand how that process works. Then with your indulgence, Mr. Secretary, can I take a round of questions, or would you prefer to answer them one by one?
A round of questions would be in order, Honourable Chairperson.
Thank you. And of course, if there are questions to the speaker as well, members, if you just indicate so. I see Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, just want to go to page number 10 on the slide number 10 on the presentation. My slide number, no, go back. Sorry, slide number 12, it's slide number 12, approved constituency program. I just want to get an idea, and I know it says it was drafted and submitted to the speakers. What does it entail? And then obviously, what is the latest on that? If either the speaker or the secretary can comment on that. And then the third question on the constituency program, now that we have gone down to level 2 and Parliament has opened up more and there's more activities in Parliament, is there consideration from the department of the speaker for us to now, because people, yesterday I posted something on Facebook about us sitting in Parliament, and somebody inboxed me and said, "Oh, Mr. Mackenzie, Parliament is open. Can the seniors come and visit Parliament now because they bored at home?" Now, we all know they've been at home for the last 4 or 5 months. Given the appropriate protocols, and obviously as a Parliament, we advertise to open up the economy, is there consideration to allow visits to Parliament for groupings like we did last year, or people to come to education visits? And then just the last questions while we're here. Under the committees are opening up now, and we're going on oversight visits. And one of the things that came out yesterday with the education visit, for example, where we need to, if you want transport to the airport, for example, you need to come to Parliament and then get a taxi or Parliament's transport to the airport. Now, logistically speaking, and practically and common sensely speaking, it'll be easier for me to go from my house to go to the airport. For example, take an Uber, it's 120, 30 bucks. Then to drive to Parliament, park my car there and take a Parliament transport to the airport, which in itself, for the Parliament staff to take a combi there for members to go from Parliament to the airport, doesn't make sense for somebody need to leave their house to go to Parliament. Members can just go to the airport and transfer the receipt for Uber, for example, to Parliament. Has there been considerations, given we are in difficult or different circumstances, to really look at what makes practical sense as opposed to what does the policy say? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. I now see Honourable Allen.
Thank you, Chairperson. I have one question and more of a comment to commend the Speaker's Office, but also the administration. I love the word pivot, and what we have seen done from the side, from the West, from the WCPP should be commended. I believe we were not only the first in South Africa, but one of the first in the world, and that should obviously be commended. But I wanted to zoom in, Chairperson, regarding staff that was currently working at home. If the administration is able to give some practical input in terms of how staff was helped and assisted during this time. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Allen. I now see Honourable Mitchell. Did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I am partly covered by Honourable Allen with regards to the staff support for working from home. And then I just want to make a comment and say well done to the administration and the ITC department. Of the translation services yesterday, I think it really worked well. So well done. I think it's important for us to take note of that.
Agreed. Thank you very much. That then is our first round of questions. Is that Honourable Mackenzie? Is that another question from you?
I just want to quickly make a comment, Chair, if you allow me, just quickly.
Yes.
Sorry, I completely forgot to say it. No, we have to congratulations to all the IT guys and generally to all the staff having served, you know, all the colleagues in other provinces and in national parliaments, and I know how they're battling. So I'm very privileged that we have really got contactable staff, people that you can WhatsApp or SMS or email. And I just want to make a special thank to all our IT staff. You've been brilliant the last few months. Thank you very much.
Here, here. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Speaker, over to you.
Mr. Secretary, will you please begin?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, Ms. Fushia will attend to the question from Honourable Mackenzie regarding the constituency program and the visitors to Parliament. Mr. Titus would be responding to the question on the travelling of members, and then also with regards to the staffing. Maybe just Chairperson, just before they start. It has been quite a busy period for the WCPP, especially our IT colleagues. But we've performed to such an extent that our colleagues now in other legislatures, I have been in contact with Mr. Skriker to find out how are you guys doing this? What are you doing? Can we assist? So like I indicated in my introduction, we would rather want to be the leaders than the followers in the sector itself. So we'd look to improve on these matters. I now hand over to Ms. Fushia and then Mr. Titus in that specific order. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. It is great hearing you all and seeing some of you occasionally. With regards to Mr. Mackenzie's question on the constituency program, the intention with this flowing from our strategic plan for the next 5 years is to strengthen the relationship between the public and the members that represent them in WCPP. So the people serving a specific constituency and the needs of a specific constituency at WCPP. Initially, we were thinking of doing something like a roadshow, but the time that we have at our disposal is not quite enough. So we focused on doing things in various areas during constituency week. What we have discussed and the inputs that we received from the Speaker and Deputy Speaker is to package it a bit differently, more in terms of
please convey what was agreed in the
yeah, I can read your mind. That we're looking at it more from a know your WCPP, or the WCPP meets the province. And that program will be driven by the administration with programs in all the various constituency areas where we are looking at bringing to the public's or the constituents' attention who their members are, how they can contact them, etc. One of the things that the Speaker's office also requested us to do, and we're looking to see whether that is worked into this WCPP Meets the People, if you want to call it that, is to have a 1-minute video of each, like introductory video of each of the members in the WCPP. But the intention really is to take the Western Cape Provincial Parliament out into all the constituency areas and to show the people who their representatives in Parliament are. So that is in terms of the constituency program. With regards to groups visiting WCPP, at this stage, in the interest of the safety of both the groups visiting us and our employees and members, we are not contemplating doing that for at least the next quarter. After that, we will obviously reevaluate the situation. We are very mindful of youth and school-going children who might if COVID-19 is contracted, might spread that rapidly from the classrooms. We don't want to create a situation where that happens, and we're also worried about the elderly, as they are in a high risk group. So we're wary at this point in time about that, but we will reevaluate as we have been doing. I think Mr. Adams said it with a pivoting in the COVID-19 universe. We constantly evaluate what we do and what we can do, because we want to be as open and as in contact with the public as what we possibly can. With regards to workshops and public education and outreach workshops, we are busy working and have been working on it for some time, a digital workshop where we can send a link and people can click on the link and they can experience a workshop as if they are sitting in the chamber. It's not by any means a replacement for personal contact, but it is the best that we can do under the circumstances. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Adams?
Chairperson, if I could maybe just add with regards to visitors to Parliament in our current level 2, and I know Ms. Fouchier's directorate was busy with the communication. As more and more members and staff and management starts to come into the building again, we have contemplated the limitation on the allowance of visitors, of members, of the speaker, of the deputy speaker and management in the building. And that's why we had opened now the visitor center downstairs, where the screening and the recording in the register now takes place in that area, to free up the lobby area where individuals and members and then also staff would enter and exit the building. We have also, as part of the process, we had also then decided to open the registration area, the reception area, where some functions in terms of the receiving of visitors will then also be taking place there. We'll start with that very slowly so that we can just see what is the impact on the flow of individuals within the building itself, and whether it addresses the needs of the people to whom those visitors are coming. But visitors in terms of groups to Parliament is something that we're not at this stage thinking of until we are quite clear we have an handle on the other aspects of visitors entering the organization and the building. Thank you, Chairperson. And now I hand over to Mr. Titus.
Sorry, before we do that, I see the Speaker would like to add.
Thank you, Chairperson. We are mindful of the need by communities to visit, Chair. And obviously, the Western Cape government has started a program to open the province. And we know that the World Tourism has declared province as being safe to open in many respects for travelers. But we are going to play it by the ear as we continue to plan in devising our strategies for opening up slowly. And I think that is the essence of what the Secretary and Ms. Fouchier is saying. So to Honourable Mackenzie, through you, Chair, it is not a period where we say we will not open, but we are considering various options in how we can safely do so. So, and we have to do that mindful of the very hard lockdown that we've had for an extended period in this country, and we cannot be on lockdown for more than what we have endured already. So we are moving towards that, but we'll continue to communicate with the members. And the question that Ms. Fouchier responded to, in case there's further questions by members on the constituency period, on the constituency program, we want to use digital means to augment the work that constituency MPs are doing, and also to augment the work of Parliament in ensuring that people know who we are and take this Parliament to where it belongs, to the people. So thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll then hand over to Mr. Titus.
Thank you, Chair. The question by Honourable Mackenzie around transport of both, I think the Honourable Mackenzie referred to members specifically, but we've also been looking at the feasibility of transport for staff. The Honourable Mackenzie is correct that we do look at the application of policy, but we are relooking policy in terms of practical sense. Currently, the policy does allow for members to travel and then claim whatever travel from an enabling allowance. So that is currently in place. It is possible then to just make those kinds of logistical arrangements with members. If members are saying that they are going to be traveling straight to a particular venue, etc. The coming to the WCPP building is a coordinated support that we provide for members and staff, but it's possible. Chair, I don't know whether you also want me to respond to the Honourable Allen's question on how staff are being accommodated at home. Chair?
Yes, please, Mr. Titus, you can continue with that part.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't get myself off mute. Please continue.
Okay. With regard to Honourable Allen's question on how staff are being accommodated, I think the previous speakers have indicated very clearly that this has been a difficult time. It's been very taxing, and I think centred to all of this was the fear that had really overrun a number of the staff members. So right from the onset, I think we started with, apart from the plans that we've put in place for continuity, etc., we have right from the beginning established a COVID-19 protocol to try and explain how we are restating our policies pertaining to leave, our policies pertaining to people in quarantine, isolation, etc. So the COVID-19 protocol, I think, took care of that, so that we had a very clear interpretation of how we interpret the existing policies within the COVID-19 context. We've had Chair, individual staff members who have been very distraught during this time. We have then had implemented our employee health and wellness program. People have had counseling. People have had support from a psychosocial perspective as well. That has also been open to managers to provide for advice, because we know that this so-called new normal was very different, and managers needed some support too in terms of how to manage their staff or their teams virtually. So that was provided through the Employee Health and Wellness Program as well as by means of support from senior management. From Sunal's space, in the communication space, there have been daily updates, particularly to statistics around COVID-19, but also on how to remain safe. We've had some wellness messages to staff via the centralized communication system, WhatsApp system, that we've rolled out as well. I think one of the major issues that we've had was the fact that people had to have their own personal infrastructure for working from home, and this was something that we had not necessarily anticipated at the onset. And the other part was that people were actually then utilizing their own data for providing support to the WCPP. We have then approved a policy to provide for an allowance to staff up to an amount of 500 Rand. Of course, they need to provide evidence for to remunerate staff or to reimburse staff for utilizing their own resources in terms of data, etc. Of course, Chair, you also would know that we've had the hard lockdown, and we've embraced the working from home context and policy. And people have been working flexible working hours then within that particular context. We've not necessarily worked in the same rigid hours as we have had at the beginning. I also want to say at this stage, Chair, that if it was not for the fact that a team such as the IT team had worked beyond the normal hours, I don't think anything within the context of virtual parliament would have been possible. So we have really relied on people also going over and beyond the call of duty in order to ensure that there's continuity in the service. From a practical perspective, initially under lockdown level 4 as well as lockdown level 3, we've had for the essential services of staff that had to really come in to the office, we have had staff transported to and from work to ensure that they're not necessarily unnecessarily exposed on public transport. Now that people are coming to work in greater numbers, we have sort of discontinued that because of the challenge of the logistical arrangements around those. I think we have also previously spoken, Chair, about the return to work plan for all of the lockdown levels, and this is the plan that we have been implementing. At the same time, I need to also indicate that we have established a COVID-19 task team under the auspices of the Sergeant at Arms, and the COVID-19 task team is representative of all of the directorates in the entire WCPP administration, and they have had regular meetings discussing not only the PPE, but looking at safety measures, looking at readying the organization for return to work at the different levels under the return to work plan. But they've also been pivotal in ensuring that nobody has contracted COVID-19 from the workplace itself. So that in broad strokes, Chair, is my input. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, would you like to add? I see your hand. Mr. Speaker?
Sorry, Chair, I inadvertently lifted it and I forgot to drop it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Are there any further inputs then from the administration?
Nothing from my side, Chairperson.
Okay. I see there's some follow-up questions. I'll start with you, Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the response, Mr. Titus and other officials. I was not necessarily referring to claiming from the enabling allowance, because I think we all know that. What I'm referring to was committees. So when a committee goes out, for example, education committee is traveling to George, what I'm asking for members and staff to travel into Parliament and then transported from Parliament to the airport, and then from the airport to Parliament, and traveling from Parliament back to their homes. It will, because members of Parliament stays in different parts of the city and different parts of, and staff members, including those staff members, including the driver that has to drive to Parliament and drive members of Parliament to the airport, and the driver must go back to Parliament and goes home. In my mind, and this is obviously my mind, it makes logistically sense for individuals to go straight to the airport using Uber or any other service, and then providing that receipts of how they got there to the committee for reimbursement, as opposed to individuals, including the drivers, having to drive to Parliament, take members to the airport, drive back to Parliament, and drive home. In my mind, it makes logistically sense for individuals, whether Uber, Taxify, to go straight to the airport, similarly when they come back. That's what I'm referring to. Thank you.
Thank you. Then, if I may, I mean, it's not exactly relevant to the report, but the constituency program did trigger a question, if I may, and that the Constitutional Court ruling in June about declaring certain sections of the electoral system unconstitutional, and the task that's been given to the National Assembly to draft new legislation for the electoral system will inevitably have an impact on the WCPP. How that, what that impact is remains to be seen, but I just wanted to ask if this is on the administration's radar. Thank you. Okay, Honourable Mackenzie, is that another question?
No, apologies. Let me lower my hand. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll hand over to you, Mr. Secretary.
Chairperson, maybe just a short response to your last question. Yes, it is on our radar, but we're just looking to see what happens in the national sphere for us then to see how it will impact us in terms of that area. Speaker, the Chairperson, your question, I had forgotten to answer your question on the review of the APP and the strategy, Chairperson. We understand that the adjustment appropriation process, because the budget is linked to what we promise in terms of delivery of our APP, and then also that feeds up to the strat plan, might be the ideal opportunity. We had, as recently as in this week or last week, we had received a similar inquiry from Provincial Treasury as it relates to the executive departments in the province. So we are attending our parliamentary support services component, are attending to that specific inquiry from Provincial Treasury, and in terms of our legislation, FAMPLA, we'll then make sure that we comply with the legislation in that regard, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. And then Mr. Titus, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I think the point that the Honourable Mackenzie is raising is a reasonable point. This is certainly something that we will look into.
Thank you. I'd like to then conclude and to move on to the next report, but Honourable Allen, do you have a burning question there?
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Chief Whip. Just one question, and I do also want to concur that IT has been amazing in assisting at oddly hours. Thank you so much to them. But in terms of, in my head, if regarding leave for staff members, if we can get an understanding from the Secretary regarding if a staffer is then in quarantine or isolation, would that come from the annual leave? Or how did the administration work around the human resource issue about if a person is in isolation or quarantine, will that come from the annual leave, or what did the administration decide in that regard? Thank you.
Thank you. Then the response to that final question on the quarterly performance report, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll allow Mr. Titus to just add a bit, but maybe just leave in general, Honourable Members and Chairperson. Our working from home strategy is based on the principle that staff, it's not about time in attendance, but about output and delivery. Also, that staff makes their services available to the WCPP during normal working hours and in exception after working hours. But staff are still allowed to take leave. And the principle of leave is then if Mr. Adams signs leave for the 4th of September 2020, even if Mr. Adams is working from home, it then in effect means that Mr. Adams' services are not available to the institution for that day, even if he is working from home, and therefore alternative arrangements would be put in place. So it's not that we had prevented staff to take leave, family responsibility leave, annual leave, or even sick leave, because we understand when they had put in that leave, it implies that their services are not available to the institution, even working from home during that period. I'm just going to ask Mr. Titus maybe just to give a more a response also to Honourable Allen's follow-up question, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the preface that the Secretary has provided is correct. All leave protocols have remained intact. So if someone has been under quarantine as a result of a family member contracting the virus, but the person is not ill, then we regarded that as working from home. The person would be within the allotted period, be in isolation, and that is not coming off from any of the leave credits. The person would be regarded as on duty, and so all kinds of requests pertaining to output would still be on track. If an individual had contracted COVID-19 during the period, the person would then be regarded as being on sick leave, and the sick leave protocols as per the policy would then be intact. So that is how we've dealt with it. So I don't think any person within the WCPP has been done in as far as their leave determinations and leave credits are concerned. We have also indicated that there is, as per the policy, if people require additional leave, the policy does allow for additional sick leave to be approved by the secretary, where this is a requirement. Of course, substantiating medical evidence must be provided in the process. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Titus. Can we then move on to the presentation or review of the first quarterly financial statement for the 2020-2021 financial year, please?
Chairperson, I hand straight over to Mr. Jawuddin.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll share the presentation. If the committee can just let me know when it's available.
Thank you.
Okay.
There we go. We can see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Then specifically with the first quarter IOM, just with regards to the first quarter, same with what Irma mentioned for the QPR report, I must make mention to the fact that the pandemic obviously has had a effect on the spending for the first quarter. So there has been a reduction in spending. There has obviously been a change in what the projected expenditure originally would have been to what the actual expenditure has been. So the picture for the first quarter is less than what we would have expected, and that's a direct result of the pandemic and the slowdown of activity, whether it's committee activity, whether it's spending activity within the first quarter. So having said that, with regards to our actual budget for the first quarter, we had for the 2021 financial year a budget of 211,957,000. That includes a direct charge. We had spent as at the 30th of June, which is the end of the first quarter, we had spent 44.4 million of that, which is a direct percentage of 20.97% of our spend for the first quarter. So we spent about a fifth of our budget as at the 30th of June. With regards to Program 1, and as the committee will see that the percentage spent for the actual sub-programs is quite low, and that's, like I said, in direct relation to specifically things like the vacant posts, which was obviously halted, particularly when we went to lockdown. That has picked up in the second quarter, but for the first quarter, the vacant posts and the progress that there would have been has obviously has slowed down, and the process of filling vacant posts obviously didn't take place in the first quarter. Other things that obviously fix this sub-program is, for example, travel. So like the speaker mentioned earlier, because of lockdown, there was basically no travel that took place in the first quarter, as well as the fact that committee activity and catering, those type of things, obviously didn't take place in the first quarter. So of the budget for Program 1 of 71 million, we spent an amount of only 12 million, which is a percentage of 17%. That's for Program 1. For Program 2, this is specifically where committee activity within the first quarter was reduced considerably, particularly within the first month or two of the financial year, when the pandemic and lockdown started, and we only started with the virtual sittings from there. So for Program 2, of the budget of 23.6 million, we only spent 3.7 million, and that's a percentage of 15%. And like I mentioned earlier, the main reason for that low expenditure percentage is because of the fact there was no catering, there was no traveling, and there were obviously vacant posts within these sub-programs which were not filled, and Hansard and translation services, because of the fact that the committee activity had slowed down. It had a ripple effect on expenditure, which is a direct result of the reduction in the committee activity, in particularly the first 2 months of the financial year, due to the lockdown and pandemic initiation. With regards to Program 3, Chair, this is particularly the public engagement and the stakeholder management and communication service. Here again, the same principle applies as for the majority of the expenditure for the financial year, particularly in the first quarter. So of the budget of 13.5 million, we only spent 2.2 million. With regards to program 4, just with regards to this program, I must make go further with my explanation to say that with regards to the total budget of 57%, this would normally have been under normal circumstances, or under a year where the norm would have been happening, so to speak. This year was a bit different in the sense that, particularly with regards to secretarial and constituency allowance, as at the end of June, we would normally have had the percentage of this higher than what is being reflected here. But the reason that the percentage for this particular sub-program is less than what it would have been last year is the fact that when political parties have submitted their financial statements, some of the political parties had submitted their financial statements in relation to secretarial and constituency allowance later than what would normally have been, which is the 31st of May. So the fact that some parties submitted their financial statements later, the assessment thereof, as well as the signing and approving thereof, only happened in July, which means that they were only paid their second quarter, or firstly the first quarter balance, and second quarter advance for the secretariat and constituency allowance in the second quarter. So we'll see a big jump in expenditure in the second quarter for particularly secretarial and constituency allowance. But under normal circumstances, this percentage would have been closer to 50% than what it currently is. With regards to allowance and contributions, obviously that's a direct correlation with members' claims, and that is based on when claims are received from members. With regards to program 5, here with the budget of 45 million, we spent 16 million, and the reason why this percentage is higher than the rest of the sub-programs, which is 36.57, is due to the fact that in April, which is the first month of the financial year, the members who had exited the 5th Parliament, which is last year, we finally received the exit gratuity figures from Alexander Forbes, and an exit gratuity were paid to members who had left the 5th Parliament as members, and that amounts were paid in April. So that is the reason why the expenditure in the sub-program is more than what we would normally have seen. However, that difference with regards to the exit gratuity would come from the Provincial Revenue Fund, and in adjustments estimate, Provincial Treasury would make provision for the amounts paid to exiting members from the 5th Parliament. Chair, that's basically a summary of our first quarter expenditure or first quarter financial statements. But just to conclude again, the main reason for the expenditure is the pandemic and the non-filling of vacant posts, which we were planning to fill within the first quarter of the financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jawudeen. Are there any questions from the members? If I could start, I'm quite astounded to hear that those exit gratuity payments were only made in April, because we've dealt with this in a previous committee, and we were told then that there was no late payment of those gratuities. If I recall, I think it was in a response from you, Mr. Titus, and there was some confusion about the terminology that we'd used as the committee about the gratuities for members. So maybe this is something you can have a look at. So in fact, those exiting members did not receive their gratuity payments until a year later. Is that correct? Okay, Mr. Jawudeen? Okay. So I'm not sure who's going to answer. I'm going to go and dig up that answer that we got previously on this.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I must apologize. My load shedding just kicked in now, but I have connected via my phone, so I'm not sure if I missed the question now in the past minute.
I was saying that I was quite astounded to hear that the exit gratuity payments to those members that left from the previous term were only paid in April, because I recall that this committee had asked that question in a previous meeting, and we were told that all of those gratuity payments had been paid, and I think it was an answer from Mr. Titus, and we had that confusion about the terminology of the gratuities. But this would then mean that those members were only paid a year after leaving. Is that correct?
If I may,
Yeah.
that is correct. However, there were two gratuities paid. So when members do leave as members, they do get a once-off gratuity, which was paid last year upon them leaving as members. The exit gratuity is a separate gratuity. It was paid on the difference between the old rules and the new rules of the pension fund. So that for those payments, we were relying on Alexander Forbes, which is the administrators of the pension fund, to provide us with that amounts to be paid. And that obviously they would get from the actuaries, which we received, I think, either in late, Mr. Tati can maybe confirm, I think we received in January and February. And with regards to checking those figures and with liaising with Provincial Treasury, we had made the payments, I think, the first week of April. But there were once-off gratuities that were paid to members in last year when they had left. Those extra gratuities where we were specifically waiting for Alexander Forbes to provide us the figures which the actuaries would have calculated based on what they would receive on the old pension fund rules compared to the new pension fund rules. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that explanation. We thankfully have Honourable Mackenzie on this committee, who is our liaison with the pension fund, and perhaps he could pose questions why it took them so long to make those calculations, because that doesn't seem fair that it took a year to do that. Yes. Honourable Mitchell.
Chair,
sorry, Honourable Mackenzie. Sorry, my apologies. Honourable Mitchell.
No, thank you, Chair. I actually wanted to ask the question, but I'm satisfied with with Mr. Jawdeen's answer, because in fact I asked that question in the previous meeting, so I just wanted to get clarity. But I'm covered now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we understand that there are two different gratuities, and the one is reliant on the pension fund to make those calculations. Honourable Mackenzie, sorry, I interrupted you.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, you rightfully so there are two gratuities. One is the exit gratuity, which if a member leaves, and that one is a determination made by, or a proclamation, for lack of a better word, made by the President and Treasury on that amount, and the officials obviously can work it out based on once that has been gazetted. The thing that is in the power of, that is in the hands of Parliament is the administration around it. So if I get the email from See the Gazette on a Monday, and I know that Member Mackenzie has been a member for this term, for 2 terms, or Parliament for 2 terms, then obviously, let me phrase it differently. If the election is on the 7th of March, or let's call it the 1st of March, and Member Mackenzie is not sworn in by the 20th of March, so I already know that Member Mackenzie is not a member of this Parliament or any Parliament. And Member Mackenzie will need his exit gratuity. Then I know I can do the administration. So at the end of March, when the Treasury or the Parliament makes that declaration, I can then already start the process of paying it out. So I think there are 2 processes. One, the administration is in the hands of this Parliament, but the proclamation is outside their hands. And that so when one get that list at the end of March, you can start doing that. The second one is the gratuity that is paid out for those members rightfully. The second gratuity, those belong to, or that is in members before 2016. And that is worked out by the actuaries, and that we are now dealing with it. Already a resolution that I passed to the pension fund board, the actuaries already worked that, and that will be on member statements. So when the member leaves, and again, when the elections is on the 1st of March, they're sworn in on the 15th of March, the officials will obviously know by the end of March who's here and who's not there already. So when that amount can make, it doesn't have to take another year to be paid out. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you for that insight, Honourable Mackenzie. Are there then any other questions on the quarterly financial statements for 2020-2021?
All covered, Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so that was quite a short...
Can I just go a quick question, Chair? Sorry.
Yes, please, Honourable Mackenzie.
On those items that are not going to, and we know the public engagement, those things are not going to happen for the rest of the year, as Mrs. Boucher indicated, etc. Has the department or Parliament administration given consideration as to where those funding should be allocated? Because at the end of the next financial year, obviously there's going to be underspent in those programs where they rightfully could not go out. And then the second question on this, given that there is a lot of, and I could, again, I speak from my experience, people pay more data, people use more airtime working from home. Given the lessons that we've learned, and I asked a question to the Premier in Parliament yesterday, has the administration started thinking as to services that can be rendered from home? And I have to give credit to the HR people as well, because things seems to get done quicker now that they work from home. And you even get emails late at night from them when they were in the office. And obviously one can understand, even happens to me when I'm in the office. I got member Mitchell walk into my office, member Ellen walks into my office, and we tend to talk a lot. And when we're not at the office and work from home, you don't have that interference. And as the administration start thinking, those that can work from home, where they become more efficient, and how can they continue with those? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. That will then close the questions on the quarterly financial statements. I'll hand over to you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Chairperson, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, and honourable members, the response to the first question is yes, we have started thinking on the budget and what could possibly be an underspend, and that is part of our review of the APP and the strategy, Chairperson. With regards to, has the administration thought of services that can be rendered from home? The short answer would be yes. And Mr. Titus and I have had a conversation on the operating model for the WCPP. Because it might not just be in one component, it could be across the WCPP, that we would have to change the operating model, because we've seen from working from home that we could gain a few efficiencies in terms of that type of operating model. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Could we then move on to item 1.3 of our agenda? Could you or the Speaker confirm if any instructions were issued in terms of section 37.6 and section 66.2 of the FAMPLA, please?
Chairperson, if the Speaker would allow me to attend to this matter, Speaker.
You may proceed, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker. Chairperson and honourable members, committee members, as at the 4th of September 2020 at 10:14 in the morning, the accounting officer of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament had not received any instructions from the Executive Authority in terms of section 37.6 and section 66.2 of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for confirming Blazer in the COVID world and the virtual world, and you really can be very proud of yourselves that you have allowed parliamentary work to continue under the most trying of circumstances. So on behalf of the committee, well done, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chairperson.
To the committee and to the team.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the members of the committee. Have a wonderful day and keep warm.
Thank you, likewise. Mr. Speaker, would you like to make any concluding remarks before we leave you?
Chairperson, what I would like to say is that the determination that was made by the Speaker with the approval of Parliament in terms of FAMPLA to give you funds in order to do your constituency work and fund civil organizations that are doing COVID-19 relief and other COVID-19 protective work. So that money must be spent. And I think the work of the POC, you need to ask us questions ongoing on that specific question of spending, so that we don't approve funds and then members don't spend the funds. I think we need to continue to look at that, also to spend it correctly. Yesterday, I signed a further determination to increase the 20% to a 50% spend on gifts and other areas where members may wish to fund, pots for soup kitchens or stoves for soup kitchens, all those capital components. So we need to ensure that we spend the budget so that the question does not come about whether we spend the money or not. We need to spend it because communities are depending on us to provide that much needed relief. So thank you very much, Chairperson, to the members of the committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All go well. And I'll ask the members of the committee to then please stay on the line. Right, members, I'm going to now table the committee minutes of the 5th of June for consideration and adoption, please. I'm going to ask the procedural officer, Mr. Davids, would you be able to beam up the minutes, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. So that was our briefings on the fourth quarterly performance report and financial statements for the 2019-20 financial year. Let's have a look at attendance. If you could move down the page, please, Mr. Davids.
Chair, my apologies. I don't know if I'm the only one that can't see it. If so, then it's fine, then you can continue.
I can see it, but it seems to be stuck on page 1. Mr. Davids?
Sorry.
Ah, there we go. Can everyone see that now? Mitchell, can you see it?
Now I can see it. Thank you, Chair.
Can we just go up to attendance quickly? Okay, thank you.
Is that fine with you, Chair?
Thank you. Then page 2.
Okay. The attendees from WCPP Chair.
Yeah.
And then we just go down to the actual meeting that occurred.
Okay. And then the resolutions.
There was only one resolution, Chairperson. I'll just make it a little bit bigger. There was just one resolution, Chair.
Okay, and that was similar to Honourable Allen's question today.
Yes.
Okay,
and then Chairperson.
And then we adopted the reports and minutes. Yeah. Right. Are there any edits or amendments to these minutes? None. Can we then adopt?
I move that we adopt, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Allen.
I second that.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. We then move on to item number 3, which is matters arising. Under this item, I wanted to raise some of the responses that we had received from some of the resolutions. But I'm not sure if members would like to have a discussion on that at this point, or whether we'd like that to stand over once we've received all the items from these minutes as well.
I agree, Chair. If it stands over, we are able to look at all of the information.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we will then not have anything under matters arising for this meeting. Are there any resolutions or actions based on this meeting or requests for information?
Chairperson.
Nothing. Okay. Oh, Honourable Mackenzie.
Can we perhaps get as just how do I put it now? From the administration to the committee, the process, the process they follow when members action to ensure the gratuity are paid timelessly.
Okay.
Maybe what we could do is ask for, just an explanatory memorandum on the different gratuities.
Yeah.
And who is responsible for each one, and what are the processes and timelines for each.
That's perfect.
Because then going forward, we will then know if something is late, for lack of a better word.
And would also help me as to work with the trustee, sorry to interrupt you, Chair, as a trustee to get that detailed process from Alexander Forbes so one can marry the two.
I think that's great. That's very good, because then, because it can't be that it takes a year to calculate someone's exit payments. I mean, I think that's too long.
Yeah.
So if we could then understand, then we'd know which is the correct body to take it up with.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Mr. Davids, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah. I'm fine, Chair. That's already captured. I've captured that.
Okay.
Chair, there's just that quarterly, just the quarterly report, Chair, that we normally adopt after each meeting, after we've sat with or met with WCPP, Chair. Can I just perhaps just flag that one?
Okay. So we'll add that to the agenda of today's meeting.
Yes, Chair, and it will be reflected in the minutes as well, Chair.
Perfect. So the committee report, the report of the Parliamentary Oversight Committee having considered the first quarter's financial performance information of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament for the 2020-21 financial year, dated 4 September as follows. The committee reported convened today, 4 September, and has concluded deliberations on the first quarter financial and performance information of the WCPP for the 2020-2021 financial year, which was referred to in terms of Standing Rule 89.1. The committee interrogated the WCPP in terms of the information that was tabled and referred to the committee. If you could just change that word to was. As legislated under section 17.2 of the FAMPLA, in accordance with section 37 and 66 of the FAMPLA, the WCPP reported to the committee that no instructions were issued for the first quarter. So that is then our report to comply with the legislative prescripts. Is everyone happy with that? Can we adopt?
That's perfect, Chairperson. They can find.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much. The report is then adopted.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, members, for your participation in the meeting. I wish you well and wish you a good day further. The meeting is then adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.